Shame on you. You remember hearing that as a child? For a lot of us our age, that's probably something you have heard. Shame on you. Shame, shame, shame. It's common praise and it leaves a lot of baggage. We can be guilty of something and not be shamed with it. But oftentimes, the way we were raised, shame was used as a tool for discipline. It's probably going to leave some scars and some baggage. And that's why I'm so excited today to have Dr. Mark Hanson on the podcast with me. He actually got so interested in this after an incident in his own life that he researched it for his doctoral dissertation. And believe it or not, it's a very approachable subject, the way that Mark deals with it. So I thought we'd just let him take it from here. Here's Mark Hanson. So, Mark, you've had quite a journey with this issue of shame. Why don't you fill us in on what happened to you?
Well, about 25 years ago, my wife and I were sitting at our dining room table and kitchen table, I guess it was, and it doesn't matter. We were sitting at a table eating dinner, and I reached across for something and I knocked over my water. And I went ballistic on myself. How could I be so stupid? What's the matter with me? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, what seemed to be 30 minutes of me railing on myself was probably only about 30 seconds. But finally, my wife got me kind of calmed down and she goes, "What's going on?" And I said, I went instantly, Bill, from the now here in that moment to a there and then memory as a kid of getting in trouble when I would knock over my water or something like that at the table. Some years later, after I kind of went through my healing journey, and I was talking to my mom, I said, "Mom, why would you get mad?" And she goes, "Well, you should have asked for help." And, you have grandkids and kids, they do 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds ask for help. No, they just do
Yep,
whatever's on, there. They just do it,
exactly right.
And the one thing I tell people is don't let anybody should on you. And they, "What did you just say?" Don't let anybody should on you. Should is one of those shame words. You should. I remember a buddy might tell me you should journal, and I'm like, I don't like journaling. It's not my thing. But that was more about him than it was me. But yeah,
Sure.
that was the big indicator for me that there was a problem
hmm
that was
Now,
was deep and internal that needed to be dealt with. And there were several other things that led up to my wife and I jumping into a healing process that really made me aware of what the real problem was, which was internalized toxic shame.
yeah, if we took that phrase that I used in the opening today of shame on you, the
Yeah.
more accurate phrase would be shame in you.
Well,
Because we carry
exactly.
that with us
Yeah.
for a lifetime if we're not careful. And even as
Yeah.
adults,
Yeah.
even as older adults, shame
Yeah.
can arise and we can find out that we still haven't dealt with whatever was said to us when we were really quite small.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, I use the analogy, if I get cut with a knife on purpose or I get cut with a knife on accident, it still leaves a wound. And yeah, they might say shame on you, but it's shame in us. And I define the difference between guilt and shame. They're used so interchangeably. They're close cousins. But guilt I describe as the feeling I have when I've done something wrong. But shame is the internal feeling that I am wrong, that there is something wrong with me, that I'm not enough. Ultimately, the lie that the enemy said in the Garden of Eden was, you're not enough, so you got to eat off this tree. And the way that comes across to different people. For me, the way that comes across is I don't matter. So I can send you a text and you don't get back to me in the time that I think you should. I can say, "Man, what's the matter? There must be something matter with me that Bill doesn't want to text back." It's very easy to fall back into that. And that's my shame wound that says I'm not enough. I'm not, if I was more, then Bill would want to reply to me quicker. So it's that internal piece of us that says there's something deeply wrong with me, and I'm just not enough. And that's a lie. The lie the enemy of our soul wants to tell us is that we're not enough.
Yeah. It seems to be like there's a tape that keeps rolling around in our heads. And it's
Yeah.
like the old 8-track tape that you put it into the player and it just continuously plays and it never stops. Track one,
Yes.
track two, track three, track four, back to track one again. And
Yeah.
if we're
And
not careful, go
yeah,
ahead.
using your analogy of that, I love that analogy. The younger people, we're talking to older people, so they'll get it. You remember when there'd be that one track that would stop in the middle and it would jump to the next track right in the middle of that song, and you're like, "That was my favorite song."
hmm
There could be those pauses. There could be those pauses that we say, I can breathe, but then all of a sudden that self-limiting belief will kick in again at some point, and
Sure.
until we can learn how to address that, deal with it and identify it as a lie, it will keep showing up in our lives over and over again and
I
have devastating effects on us.
I see the results of this. I see the implications of it every day when I'm
Yeah.
working with people in ministry. And we
Yes.
just finished up a series in our church about breaking that loop. And
Yeah.
the fact is that when you have Christ in you, you're a new creation. All the old things have passed away and everything's become new. But somehow we still hear that voice and the accusations from when
Yeah.
we were a child and when we were shamed. And I think,
Yeah.
it's I tried to use the analogy, and maybe you can tell me if I'm right or wrong here. I tried to use the analogy that it's as though Satan is shouting at us from outside the room. Inside
Yes.
the room, God is speaking truth to us, but from outside the room, we still hear the accusations. Would you say that's
Yeah.
accurate?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the enemy of our soul is always willing to tell us those things over and over again. And sometimes, Bill, he doesn't even have to be the one tells us, we tell ourselves.
Now, this led to a hugely big topic in your life, so big, in fact, that you did your dissertation on this topic. Oh,
Yeah.
shame. It must really have hit you hard all those years ago that you were still carrying with you baggage from childhood. What have you done to overcome that?
Well, my wife and I participated in right after it was the way God orchestrated it was just a beautiful thing. It might be another time we talk about that, but the Lord led us to a ministry that's no longer in existence, but they had a seminar that they did. And so we went to this seminar, and it was very interesting because it was 4-part seminar. And the first part seminar, there was one point when the facilitators asked, he goes, "Hey, some of the volunteers here who are helping, they keep kind of a list of the people they think are just playing the game or not playing the game." And so he goes, "If you think you're on that list, stand." So I stood and a couple other people did. He got to me and he goes, "Why do you think you're not playing the game?" I said, "Because I'm playing the game." And I kind of stumped him. I realized later, but in the moment I didn't. And he goes, "Well, talk about that a minute." And he says, I says, "Well, I'm not playing the game because I'm playing the game. I'm telling you what I think you want to hear." And that I gave too much information. Then they got me on that one, which was fine because it needed to be exposed. And the next question he said was, "Well, your homework was to write down your self-limiting beliefs. Did you do it?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he goes, "Well, why don't you share them with us?" And I said, "Well, they're not that big of a deal." He said, "Well, so then read them." I couldn't read them, Bill, because they were written on a card because I was bawling. I was just bawling. And the two that came to mind, one was everyone must like me, and the other one was I must not look stupid in any given situation. And that was when I started to realize. And then he had done his the facilitator had done his doctoral work on toxic shame as well, and explained it. And as soon as he explained it, I got it. And once a person understands and gets toxic shame, it's very hard to not see it when it shows up either in yourself or in someone else. And as a pastor and as a coach, I don't have to talk to people very long before their toxic shame will rise to the surface. And it was in there that, where it really came to me was in the second phase of this seminar, and where we really did the deep work, as they would say, is, jump into the deep end of the pool. And this idea of everyone must like me got me in trouble when I had to stand in front of my wife and say to her, "I don't have anything for you."
Mm,
That stings. That
sure.
stings. And then and I sat down and one of the volunteers came up to me and said, do you have anything for yourself? Do you take care of yourself?" was basically the question. And I just fell apart because I was so trying to compensate for that feeling of not being enough that I was giving all my power and my energy away to everybody else. And I remember just, I had to wait for the rest of these people to all finish this exercise, and the facilitator said, "So what's going on?" Because I'm falling apart. And I said, "I gave it all away. I give all my energy and my power away. Don't take care of my wife. Don't take care of me." And I looked over at my wife and I'm bawling again. And I am so sorry. I am so sorry. And that was the real one that hit me, that what what I was dealing with and the toxic shame and how bad it was. And that was really where God started, I use a quote from my dissertation is when it comes to toxic shame, Bill, the curse is the cure. And the curse of shame is the fear of exposure.
Hmm.
And so I use the analogy of a beach ball. And everybody as a kid, you're in the pool and you got the beach ball, and what do? You got to hold that beach ball under the water, see how long you can
Hmm.
hold it up there before it pops up. I'll tell people. So if you had that beach ball and you had a Sharpie and you wrote all your shame wounds on there,
Hmm.
when maybe someone said something, you're stupid, you're fat, you're ugly, you don't play sports well, you throw like a girl, you run, whatever it is. Nobody likes it. You don't have any friends on Facebook, whatever the deal is. If you wrote all those down, and what we do is that beach ball, we try to hold it under. And eventually something happens and that beach ball shoots up in the air, just like it does when we were in the pool as a kid.
Hmm. Hmm.
But now what we do is we grab that beach ball and we try to get it back under the water, under the surface, hoping no one saw it.
Hmm.
Because what is the curse of shame? Exposure. If someone sees it, they may reject me or they won't like me or fill in the blank. But one of the best things we can do where the curse becomes the cure is we let that beach ball go. Because once it's out there, then we can deal with it because we can't change or heal what we don't acknowledge.
There's so many
Once it's out,
similarities,
yeah, yeah,
so many similarities between guilt and shame. Because I
yeah,
heard you
yeah,
say that you felt guilty about giving your wife the leftovers, but you
yes,
felt shame that pushed you to perform for people and try
yeah,
to be everybody's best buddy. And
yes,
it's
exactly,
so human to do that. My
yes.
dad had a saying when I was growing up that really has helped me a lot. Jesus lived on this earth for 33 years and he couldn't please everybody. Who are we to try?
Exactly, exactly,
But we
yeah,
all
yeah,
do. We
yes,
all
yeah,
do.
yeah, yep, yeah,
Instead of
sure,
trying
because
to please God with a holy life, we're actually trying to please people by putting on a
yeah.
facade or playing a part like we're in a play.
Yeah, yeah. I remember I was pastoring in Independence, Missouri, or Missouri is the right way to say that, as you well know. And I remember it was in December. We had finished up this second phase, and I had really gone to a place of finding my breakthrough and really discovering that I'm a worthy, confident, courageous man. That was a long, hard journey, and I fought hard to figure it out. But I was living the other way. I was unworthy. I felt I was unworthy. I was insecure and lacked any kind of confidence at all. And that's how, no, I mean, when you're living like that, you're going to do whatever you can to try and compensate that. When I finally realized God's created me with value and courage and confidence, it was a game changer for me. But I remember going home and that next Sunday, we were having our Christmas program and it snowed. First snow of the season in Missouri, Kansas City area. When you get your first snow of the season, it's like a blizzard.
Hmm.
It can be 2 inches, but everybody thinks it's a blizzard. I'm not going out in this. I live in Western New York. That doesn't phase us. I remember sitting there with my wife, which I normally didn't get to sit with my wife because I was preaching. But I remember sitting there, Bill, and I looked around. Attendance was low. And I remember it was a huge moment for me that I said to myself, "This doesn't mean I'm a bad pastor. It just means it snowed."
There we go. There we go.
That was so liberating to me to let that shame go. That if I was a better pastor, that's the lie the enemy wanted to tell me. If you were a better pastor and if you mattered, they would be here. No, it snowed. It had nothing to do with me. Liberating, just liberating when we can just say the fun. Well, it's fun, but it's also a healing thing. When that beach ball comes up and we just let it be there, the power of those shame wounds is diminished dramatically
Hmm.
because now, so here's my shame wound up here. And Bill says, see yeah, I know. Yeah, but I know. And all of a sudden the enemy loses power. Anybody who's throwing that against you loses power because you're acknowledging, yeah, I got some stuff here I need to deal with. And shame almost always comes from someone else. For men, I did my doctoral work on healing the shame wounds in men. It's almost always from the father or a father figure.
I get that.
You
My
know,
dad was really good about those things, but there were other voices in my life that were really quite caustic.
a coach, teach. Yeah.
Let me ask you the question then. Do you just take a pencil and start erasing all those things that were said about you? That doesn't seem possible to me. What do you actually have to do to put that stuff away and begin to think of yourself the way God says you are?
Well, part of it is going back to what I said. Dr. Phil has said it. Numerous people have said you can't change or heal what you don't acknowledge. If I don't acknowledge and point out, this is a lie. This is a lie of the enemy. And then I start exploring, and it might take a little bit. And usually you need some help doing this, to have someone else be able to speak truth into us that I do matter. And here's how I have mattered. Here's some, well, you're just stupid. You're going to look stupid. I have looked stupid before. Sometimes, yeah, everybody's got a past is my thing. Everybody's got a
Sure.
past. We've made mistakes. The question is, what am I going to do with it? And do I want to stay there? Because some people, I went to work for this organization after a while, and I dealt with some people that had deeply ingrained toxic shame, so deep that they couldn't see they had any value. And one of the things that I've learned is I would rather deal with someone who's angry than someone who's resigned. If they're angry, that means they got some fight in them.
Hmm.
If they're resigned, you've almost got to do it. It's almost like a recovery mission more than a rescue mission,
Sure.
and that can be really, really hard. But to help people, and it's different with every person, but to help people see they do have value and that they are lies. Would you believe a lie from someone else? These, all of us believe lies, as my wife, who is a counselor, reminds me, she goes, sometimes all you can do is work with what's said to you,
Hmm.
and sometimes people lie to us. But if we can get people to say, are you tired of this? Are you tired of letting this have control? That's one of the first steps, is to say, this isn't working for me anymore. I need to get some help. And, I have had a counselor myself, Bill, and I always say I don't fault anybody for walking through the doors of a counselor or a coach, someone who knows what they can do to help with this, because it takes a lot of courage to let that beach ball up and say, my life's not working and I need to get some help here to help it get working, because it's cost me too much. That's one of the things I will talk to people. What does it cost you to believe those lies? For me, it was costing me my marriage. We didn't end up in divorce or anything, but my wife and I were doing ministry, as I put it, at the same time, but not together.
Hmm.
And that was tough. That was very, very tough. And sometimes that, there's where the shame lie comes in. You probably heard it too. Well, you're a pastor, your family comes second. No, no.
Absolutely.
You know,
Pastor has to come
God's
first.
got
Yeah.
first.
Or the family. Yeah.
Yeah, and then even your spouse before your children, because your children need to
Right.
see that their parents are in a healthy relationship. And so to just acknowledge it is the first step and say, I need some help with this, because and sometimes it goes deep, and to just be able to process it out and then have someone help you say, but so what is the truth? And some
Hmm.
people don't always know what that truth is, and they might need some help. Sometimes it's asking, were there examples when that was not the case with you, that you
Hmm.
did excel or you did do well, whatever whatever the case is. So, but that first step is, and that's why I say the curse is the cure.
Hmm.
We're so afraid that if someone sees my stuff, that they're going to reject me, they're going to hate me, whatever, they're going to make fun of me, they're going to add more shame onto me. And so we deal with it in different ways. We attack others, we attack ourselves, we isolate, we do any number of things
Oh,
to,
cover up is one of them.
oh, yeah, it's a cover up. Exactly. Just as long as they can't see it, but once, one of the things that for myself, I can talk to a person pretty soon, and I'll pick up on phrases or they'll use that are very self-defeating. And I can almost instantly tell, there's the wound. There's the wound.
Sure.
Let's deal with it.
Sure. Well, let me test a hypothesis. You're the guy that did the deep dive here. So you're my expert. All right. I think that as a believer, we've got three sources of truth in our lives. We've got the Word of God, the inspired Word of God. We've got the voice of the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit. I think you would totally agree with that. And
Yes,
then on
absolutely.
top of that, we have the testimony of the saints. So
Yes.
those three things are that cord of three strands in my mind that allows us to have a better perspective. A three-cornered stool or three-legged stool stands firmly. And
Yes.
when we talk about those three factors, the word of God and what it says about me, and
Yep.
then the believers and what they say about me, and the voice of the Holy Spirit and what he says about me, I think we have a pretty reliable compass to know what's truth and what's fiction. And then
Yeah.
where coaching comes in, help me if I'm wrong, but where coaching comes in is you are a reliable witness to the truth or to the falsehood of every stated belief.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the coach is gonna come alongside you and say, challenge you a little bit. Is that really true, Bill? Is that true? Is that true according to scripture? Does God think you're a failure? Because there's a big difference between being a failure and having failed. I have failed at many things, but I'm not a failure. And you say, well, that's just, semantics. No, not really. Not really. I mean, I can fail at something. I mean, getting on your podcast, I had to upload, load Chrome on there because I don't use Chrome. And I'm like, oh my goodness, well, there could have been a ton of shame there for me
Yeah, and I
that
did not
said,
worry about that in the least. So you might have been
yeah,
panicked
yeah,
that you were
and
disappointing me in some way. I felt no
yeah,
disappointment. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. But there's where the enemy could come in and say, see, you're stupid. You look stupid to Bill. But what did I do? I told you, I'll be on in a minute. Got to take care of this problem, took
it
care of
was
it.
absolutely not an issue.
It was a non-issue, but the enemy would have us believe it is. And God's, you
Sure.
know, I think God says a lot of times for myself, he says, angels, come over here, watch what he's about ready to do.
Mm,
And then, it's like God puts it on Instagram up in heaven or something. Watch this one. He's going to really, I flipped my truck a couple years ago, and my buddy reminds me that I parked my truck upside down a ditch so I wouldn't have to, have anybody bang their doors into my car, into my
yeah,
truck. We all fail sometimes, but it does not make us a failure.
correct. And I
You
think
know,
that that's really important. We're not spring chickens. Neither you nor I are truly young men,
no,
but we still fight this even as we've aged.
yeah, yeah,
And there's probably people 10 years older than me, 10 years younger than you that are fighting all of these things and thinking they're the only one on the battlefield.
yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
talk to the older guy who's listening or watching this podcast and give him the truth that he can quote to himself that's going to begin to break that bondage that he's been in.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest one, and I have to tell myself this one now, Bill, and I'm 59. So when I'm around people that are 79, they tell me I'm a kid. I hang out near with 79 now because they make me
It
feel
affirms you,
better.
doesn't it? I do the same thing.
And you and I were talking about this the other day. One of the United States of America, and it's getting better. And you and I talked about this. There's a new generation that are seeing the value in older people, that they have stuff they can learn from them. But we have traditionally been and especially several generations ago, we did not value age and experience. And I had shared the story with you about, we had a Samoan congregation meeting at my church, and I was talking to the pastor, when they were getting ready to go in their service, and he said, I said, well, what are you doing after church? He goes, oh, we're going over to the old woman's house for dinner. I'm like, my eye was like, what? What do you mean the old woman? How disrespectful. He goes, Mark, in our culture, that's respectful.
Yes.
We value. Old was not a taboo word. It was a word of respect. And yeah, we have a younger generation. I think probably the lack of fathers and male role models, that they're looking to older people. And so in answer to your question, Bill, I think, older people have volumes of experience. And this is just coming to me. Richard Rohr wrote a book called, I think it was called Falling Upward. He's a Catholic priest, deals with does spiritual formation with men and stuff. And in that book, I think I got the right title. He talks about that we spend the first half of our life with a container, and we're filling it with knowledge and experience and all these things. And and we put the lid on it. But then when we get older, we take the lid off and we offer all that to other people. And several years ago, just personal story here, I went to my own counselor and I said, I have this container that I've been filling up. And I said, my fear is no one's going to want what I have in here.
So untrue.
So untrue. I knew it, but I was telling myself, no one's going to want this. And the enemy was having me believe it. And my counselor helped me say, Mark, take the lid off and just have it there. Someone's going to walk by and say, hey, I think I could use that. Could I have that? Could I use it? Yeah. And he goes, and then there's other people you're going to say, hey, I think I have something in here that might help you. So my encouragement is you have experiences, knowledge, information that somebody needs and can use. And there's another book out there by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art. And in there, he says, don't rob us of your contribution. Give us what you've got. And I remember some years ago, my wife's parents were older. They were 43 when she was born. And I remember her dad was getting all frustrated because he couldn't mow his yard anymore with the push mower. And I said, let's go get you a riding mower. And so he goes, well, my yard's not big enough for riding. I said, let's get you one of those little ones that, looks like a little scooter at the, people were, got the little motor in the back. And we went and got him one. It was like maybe $400 back in that day. Hell, he had a ball with that thing. He would cut branches, stuff, pile them up. He'd drag them out. He had a ball with that thing. And I remembered it because I'm like, there's time. That story comes to me sometimes that sometimes I just got to find a different way of doing things.
Yeah.
And it's as much as I have helped other people, it's okay for me to ask them to help me. And sometimes when I ask a younger person, hey, could you help me do something? That's the open door for me to have a connection with them, to bestow a little bit of wisdom on them. Another funny story, I'd been out to Milwaukee to spend a day with our coach, Justin, and I was flying back to Buffalo, and I was in Nashville, and I got on, it was Southwest. They're not paying me to say that. So anyway, it was just Southwest. You pick your own seat. So I'm going, and there's a seat between these two guys, and the one's a young guy is against the window, and I'm like, okay. I said, he goes, yeah, have a seat. So I sit down. I says to him, well, I said, I'm an easy keeper. Don't worry about it. We talked for an hour and a half, and we got off the plane. We were walking out together, and I was headed south, and he was waiting for my ride, and he was gonna, he lived right there in the Buffalo area, and I was on the plane, and I said, can I give you my number, text you my number, so we can, so you'll have it. And I said, if you ever need a coach or something, let me know, and we'll talk. And he goes, yeah. So I texted him my number, and he goes, I gave him my number, and he goes, well, I'll text you when I get off the plane. Well, I thought he was going to write me off. Billy texted me. He says, hey, this is, he gave me his name, told me his name. He goes, I told you I'd text you, and I am. He goes, I enjoyed your words of wisdom. He'd say, because I'd give him little nuggets, treat your girlfriend like a thoroughbred. She'll never be a nag, and he's laughing. But, we struck a little friendship. And I've texted him several times, and we've had little chats going on. Don't sell yourself short, and don't rob us of your contribution. You have experience, you have wisdom, you have knowledge, you have information that somebody needs, and don't let them write you off because you got a little, gray hair or whatever. There's younger people that are seeing the value in that. And if we treat them, communicate with them, and we can learn a lot from them too.
Sure. I think there
We can
has to
learn
be
a
that exchange. Mark,
Yes. Silly.
I'm going to put you on the spot here and say this is way more material than we can cover in one podcast. I think I'm going to have to invite you to come back and share with us a time or two more, because I think
I'd
it's
love
an
to.
important topic for older people to be able to
Yes.
deal with this. I mean, even as we were talking tonight, and it's something to think about for people listening or watching, so much of our evangelical circles, the message of invitation was given through words of shame, not words of conviction, not words of guilt.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think for some people, they associate that now with God. And so,
Yes.
maybe the next time we get together, we can talk about this idea
Yes.
of reframing our picture of God to where the shame is left off.
Yes.
Because
Right.
I think that would be a valid thing for older people. In fact, it'd be valid for anybody,
Yeah.
particularly for those of us that were around in those days when, that guy was up there, talking to us, and everything about him was earnest, and everything about him was intended well. But when that finger's pointing at you and it's already building on wounds that you carry, sometimes I think we then associate that with God. So I'd love to have you come back.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. Love to do it. Love being with you on this one. This it sounds funny, but this topic of shame and healing and grace, that's my wheelhouse. I love talking about it because I see that I know what it does to people, and I just want to help people be set free from it.
Well, you're like a doctor who helps a patient get over something. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll see my surgeon next week because I had hip surgery a year ago. And when I was on my way into the hospital, I was barely able to use a walker. And when I left the hospital, I was walking on my own 2 feet 24 hours later. That doctor made a significant change in my life. All
Yeah.
that weight, all that baggage was
Yeah.
removed. And when we can do this with shame and turn shame into an accurate sense of conviction, I think we're going to see a lot more positive growth in our Christian walk. So, again, Mark,
Absolutely.
thanks so much for being here tonight or today. And I really appreciate you saying that you come back. I'm going to hold you to that now.
All right. I'll let you. I'll let you. Thanks,
All
Bill.
right, Mark. Thanks so much.
Yep. God bless.
I'm confident that you found this as valuable as I did. Dr. Mark Hanson has a handle on this topic of shame that I think a lot of us need to work through. This idea of having to go back and see what it was that triggered shame in us and how it might be manifesting itself even today. God has help for that. And we want to be able to go to his word. We want to be able to go to a reliable coach. And we want to be able to work through those things because when we do, we find real freedom. And so I'm really excited to have Dr. Mark Hanson come back in the future. We'll probably have a couple more episodes with him. And in the meantime, I just want to call your attention to a few things. Number one, please check out the Finding Meaning and Purpose in Retirement page on Facebook. In it, you'll find a whole community of people who are gathered together around a common topic. Let's make retirement the most fruitful, most wonderful, most fulfilling season in our lives. The second thing is to make you aware that I do help Christians in their retirement navigate the chaos, challenge, and confusion of their new season so that they can experience more fulfillment, freedom, and friendship. And if you'd like to know more about that, I'd love to have you check out clarifyfocus.com and look for how to contact me, and we can have a coffee chat together. And I really do believe that it's important for all of us to have someone that we walk with in this season. There's so many things that happen: isolation, there's a sense of disappointment, there's a sense of disillusionment that happens. And to walk with someone who is already in that process or who has experienced those things, it's really very valuable. And so I encourage you to check out the podcast again, www.clarifyfocus.com, and look for the coffee chat tab. God bless you. Have a great day.